When is the last time you played with your food? Because in today's video, I want to share 3 interactive high-protein bento boxes that you can bring to work or school this week. So instead of dropping $15 on a fast casual spot or the mundane heating up of last night's leftovers and shoveling it into your mouth while sifting through your inbox, these meals allow you to sit down for 10 to 15 minutes, create different bites of food, and actually enjoy your lunch, which is something I think all of us have a tough time with in this age of constant distraction. And I have the theory that using the bento box as a Lunchable for adults is what makes this so much fun. Now, before we get to the recipes, you may have a couple of questions like, what's the best type of bento box to get? Or how do I get inspiration on what to make or add to my various compartments? But first, a quick thank you to today's sponsor, WeWork. The WeWork All Access membership is now starting at a special introductory price. And for the past 4 months, I have been using WeWork as a way to get away from the distractions of working from home or to drop into when I'm traveling. There's always dependable high-speed Wi-Fi, coffee, tea, and other professional amenities all included. And it's completely changed how I work, as I'll typically spend the first 3 to 4 hours of the day here, and I basically trained myself to get into this deep work flow state where I do my best writing and creative thinking that leads to the videos you see on this channel. A bit more on WeWork later, but first, let me explain why I prefer this interactive approach to using a bento box. Maybe you can relate to this, but as a kid, my parents would not get them for us, so I was always jealous when someone had a Lunchable at school, which looking back is kind of weird. Because I could have a really good tasting sandwich, fruit and chips, but seeing another kid take out the circular bread, spreading on cold tomato sauce and pre-shredded mozzarella seemed like the best lunch ever. And to me, this is why I think making bento boxes is so much fun as an adult. First, you get to use your creativity in actually designing what you want to put in. And then secondly, again, when you go to eat lunch, you can create bites with a variety of the items you added. And maybe it's not a perfect parallel, but there is this article from the New York Times about how to add more play as a grown-up and its potential benefits. And to me, filling up a bento box feels so much different than meal prep because the means of actually creating it is pretty fun in and of itself, whereas meal prep kind of feels like a necessary evil. So that may be the psychology behind why it's pretty enjoyable, but next you may be wondering, how do I figure out what to put into my bento box? So obviously, I'm going to give you 3 ideas in this video, but more generally, the word bento is derived from the term convenient or convenience in Japanese, and in short, it's a portable meal of rice and usually several side dishes that can take on countless forms. This Google Arts and Culture article is a great resource to look into the origins of bento, and in video form, Paolo from Tokyo has several videos showcasing bentos made in Japan shops, and Imamu Room has a channel with loads of the bentos that she makes for her husband each week. And in Japanese culture, there's this concept of the rule of 5 or the harmony of food, which there's definitely a lot more to it. But for example, you could build each meal with the 5 colors, such as red, green, yellow, white, or black, the 5 flavors, sweet, salty, sour, bitter, or umami, the 5 methods of preparation, the 5 senses, or 5 reflections. So obviously, traditional Japanese food is going to be great to use for your bento lunch, but really any cuisine can be used as inspiration to fill up these various compartments. For example, 2 great videos of mine to use for reference would be how to eat healthy meals and never run out of ideas, or how to meal prep if you hate meal prep. And last up, you may be wondering, what's the best type of bento box to get? In short, any container will work, but after buying a couple of them, these are the 4 key features that I would look for. First is at least 2 separate layers. This way you can add stuff that needs to be reheated to one layer, and fresh stuff like pickled items, vegetables, or garnishes can be used in a separate layer. Secondly, you definitely want a sauce container or compartment. And this way you don't have to bring a whole bottle of sauce around with you or try to pre-sauce your bento. Thirdly, a movable divider, and this just allows you to have a bit more freedom when constructing. And fourth is some built-in cutlery. It's definitely not as important as the first 3, since you can probably bring or find your own, but it is nice to have with you in a pinch. But now let me show you the first bento box that I absolutely was demolishing. For this first bento box, I was inspired by temaki from Japanese cuisine, which is a type of sushi hand roll. And I'm adding the wrappers to the bento box so then I can assemble them at lunch. And you can use any protein for this, but I was in the mood for some salmon. I thawed a fillet from the freezer, removed the back skin, and just gave it a sprinkle of salt. To cook this, add a little bit of oil to a hot pan and place it down to develop a nice sear, and I like doing the flat side first. After a couple of minutes, add a tiny drizzle of oil to the uneven side and then flip over the salmon. And it's hard to get an even sear on this side since it does belly out a bit, so I like adding a weight or just pressing down with the spatula to develop that browning as best I can. After about 7 minutes, the salmon will be done. Outside of the salmon, I made some rice that I threw in a container for leftovers, and additionally some spicy pickled carrots. For these, I added julienne carrots to a glass jar along with some thinly sliced serrano peppers, and to that, add salt and a tiny pinch of MSG. Lastly, I poured over a solution of 1 part water and 1 part white vinegar, and this will store in the fridge for quite a long time. To assemble the bento, I placed the reheatable items in the bottom layer. So first goes in the salmon, followed by 100 grams of cooked rice in the center, and lastly, for some additional protein, I used 50 grams of frozen edamame on the side with a little sprinkle of salt. For the top layer, I added 10 grams of Kewpie mayo to the sauce container along with 10 grams of sriracha before mixing that up. Next to that, I added the pickled carrots, and then for our interactive component, I have seaweed wrappers, which I broke into half sheets so they fit into the box. Then at lunchtime, all you have to do is reheat the bottom layer and assemble it into little seaweed snacks. So I like to layer the sauce first, followed by the rice, edamame, a piece of salmon, and lastly, the pickled carrots. And the entire contents of the bento box clock in at 579 calories and 53 grams of protein, which is pretty solid in my book. So obviously you could make every bite exactly the same. You can make every bite a little bit different just depending on what you want to add, but I could literally crush this style of bento box almost every single day if I needed to. But with that being said, let's move on to bento box number 2, which is much more in kind of the Mexican inspired range. For bento box number 2, I was feeling a little nostalgic for Taco Bell beef, and we have just 3 components that can be made in bulk and used throughout the week. For the meat, I actually used 1 pound of ground venison and added that to a ripping hot pan. Add a hefty pinch of salt over the top and then add whatever taco seasoning you want. This one was 1 part cumin, garlic powder, and smoked paprika. I let the meat sear on one side for about 2 minutes before chopping it up with the spatula. Now, to sauce this up, I like to add tomato paste and habanero hot sauce. And this is 15 grams of tomato paste and then however much of the hot sauce you want depending on the type you are using. And this creates that saucy kind of feeling you would get with a higher fat ground beef and really transform the flavor into something special. Once the beef is cooked through and flavored to your liking, just transfer it to a container and let's move on to the beans. After cleaning the pan, I add a 10-gram drizzle of oil and toss in 1 clove of thinly sliced garlic, along with 1 spoonful of chipotles in adobo, and let that saute for 30 to 60 seconds. Next, come in with 1 can of pinto beans with the liquid, along with a small pinch of salt, depending on how much sodium the can has. Let all of that come to a simmer, and then optionally, I like to mash the beans to give them a creamy texture. And one last important step here is to add a bit of acidity and more salt to taste. So I used a capful of vinegar because it was out of limes, and then a bit more salt, and this is really what will help that flavor pop. Again, transfer to a container, and lastly, let me tell you why I love making a quick slaw to store in the fridge. For this, I added 200 grams of thinly sliced cabbage, 50 grams of thinly sliced red onion, 1 thinly sliced serrano pepper, and a sprinkle of salt to a large bowl, and mix that all up separately first. Once mixed, add a capful of vinegar, 10 grams of oil, and some toasted cumin seeds before mixing all of that up. And a slaw is so great to have on hand because it keeps really well in the fridge, provides a lot of volume with minimal calories, and provides crunch and contrast in flavor. To assemble the bento, again, I place those reheatables in a separate layer, so that is both the seasoned beef and the beans. In the next section, I placed the slaw, chopped up cilantro, some grated cheese, and then in this little center console, I added some non-fat Greek yogurt and more hot sauce to use as a sauce. I also decided to add some cherry tomatoes to that cilantro compartment. Lastly, in the very top section, I broke up some tostadas, but tortilla chips or tortillas would work great too. Again, I just love having that interactive component to eat with. So nothing too special here, but it's just a much more fun way to eat. Like, you can bring this to the office and kind of sit down and actually enjoy yourself. Be a little bit creative. You can make every bite the same, make every bite a little bit different. Sometimes you go heavier on the coleslaw, sometimes you go heavier on the beef and the beans or the cheese. Or, you can just end up mixing it all together anyway if you want to, but it's more fun, it's more playful, and just a little bit creative. So, with that being said, let's move on to Bento Box number 3. For Bento Box number 3, I was inspired by a meze platter from Mediterranean cuisine, which is always interactive. And the only thing I actually made for this was some za'atar-crusted chicken breast. I thinned out 2 chicken breasts and then added a sprinkle of salt to both sides. Then I just followed the blackening technique I showed a couple of videos ago. So for this, all I did was sprinkle the za'atar mix all over both sides of the chicken. To cook, add a bit of oil to a hot pan and then lay down the chicken breast. And again, cook on one side for about 3 to 4 minutes to develop a sear, and then flip it over to cook the other side. Then just slice it up, toss it in your bento, and save the rest for another day. Now, you can always make these as easy or as complicated as you want, and I was feeling a little bit lazy this time around, so I just bought a bunch of store-bought stuff. For this, I picked up a variety of pickled items, cheese, hummus, and then started filling in the bento. So to layer this, I added some hot and sweet peppers, marinated olives, hummus, Havarti cheese with dill pickles, and lettuce. Then to the sauce compartment, I added some yogurt with a sprinkle of oregano and black pepper. And lastly, I found these low-calorie flatbreads that I added next to the chicken, and that's all there is to it. So keep these 3 bento boxes in mind for that next spontaneous workday at your local WeWork office. If you are a creator, remote worker, or entrepreneur that needs space for focused work sessions or space to meet with clients or collaborators, head to the link below in the description to try WeWork All Access for yourself, starting at a special introductory price. And thank you again, WeWork, for sponsoring this video. So my power is actually out, which is why this is in the low position. I can't adjust it because it's a standing desk. But this is kind of a perfect meal to eat when you don't have any way to heat anything up, because it's a lot of fresh stuff. And then obviously we just got the chicken and the flatbread, and I am really excited to dive into this. But anyway, hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. Again, using kind of a bento box or the bento box framework in any way that you want, but I really do find it a really enjoyable, interactive lunch eating experience. So the recipes for these versions will be up on my website, but that is going to wrap it up for me in this one. I will catch you all in the next one. Peace, y'all.